We are now in Kant lecture, part 7. Here we discuss four duties as examples of laws of nature. Rational nature, which is the goodwill. And the four duties are concerning suicide, promises, talent, neglect, and assistance of others, neglect. Also, here we will discuss the notion of self-love, which apparently is the essence of physical nature, and that it really self-contradicts when we attempt to make it into universal rational laws. The answer to the question of the goodwill is that it is choosing to follow those principles that can be willed as universal laws. And that answer is transformed into the new answer that the goodwill is a choosing to follow those laws that can constitute a nature. Let us next see how that works out by investigating Kant's famous examples of four duties concerning suicide, promises, developing one's talents, and assisting others. Concerning suicide, Kant claims that it is out of concern for oneself, in pursuit of the benefit of escape from strong suffering, or out of self-love, or love for oneself, that one kills oneself. There's a contradiction here, that the same principle, that is to preserve life, also destroys life, if this principle was made into a universal law. This principle could function as an exception to the universal law, but not as the universal law. This principle would not be part of rational nature. In essence, Kant is appealing to that we intuit that there's something deeply contradictory when a living being, that's by its nature strives to live, takes their own life. The duty of goodwill is thus not to take one's own life. If that principle by which life is preserved, principle of self-love, also destroys life, this principle could not be made into a universal law of nature. There simply wouldn't be any life to preserve or to destroy. Okay, so there's a rational duty of the goodwill to never commit suicide. Concerning promises, we have already seen Kant's claim, but it is articulated a bit differently here. Out of concern for oneself or love for oneself, one would seek the benefit of borrowing money intending not to repay it. There is a contradiction there, that the same principle that is to deliver benefits of false promises also destroys those benefits by destroying the very possibility of promises, if this principle was made into a universal law. If everyone who believed themselves to be in need of money, but also knew that they would not repay the money, went ahead and borrowed money, no one would ever lend anyone any money. Thus, the principle behind such action could function as an exception to the universal law, but not as the universal law. Thus, this principle could not be part of rational nature. The duty of goodwill is thus not to make promises one does not intend to keep. Concerning the duty to develop one's talents, Kant claims that a rational being clearly sees that by the very nature of what they are, our capacities are ours for the purpose of developing them to be used as a means in achieving all kinds of purposes that we give ourselves. There would be a contradiction in rational nature that gives talents to be developed if it also permits for those talents not to be developed, if that was made into a universal law. The principle behind such action could function as an exception to the universal law, but not as the universal law. Thus, this principle would not be part of rational nature. The duty of goodwill is thus not to neglect one's talents for the sake of greater pleasures elsewhere or avoidance of suffering, out of concern or love for oneself, but to develop our talents. Right? So the duty of goodwill is to develop one's talents. Concerning the duty to assist others, Kant argues that the principle of concern with one's own being would contain a contradiction if it was made into a universal law. There comes a time in every person's life when they are in need of sympathy, love, and concern from others. But exclusive self-concern and self-love made into universal law would make that sympathy and concern from others non-existent. If everyone is concerned with themselves only, no one would get any concern or love from anyone else. There would be a contradiction in rational nature that makes us in need of concern and love from others, but also makes each person only concerned over themselves. The principle behind such action could function as an exception to the universal law, but not as the universal law. Thus, this principle would not be part of rational nature. The duty of goodwill is thus not to neglect for the sake of self-concern and self-love, to assist others, but to actually assist them. There's a duty of goodwill to assist others. If we carefully look at Kant's discussion of nature in these four examples, it is clear that he takes self-concern and self-love to be central to what we are by nature. That is to say, physical nature. That is indeed how our desires operate, subject to cause and effect of physical nature. And as it happens, according to the cause and effect laws of physical nature, desire may operate in contradictory ways, logically contradictory ways, that actually undermine the essence of self-love and self-concern. As when, out of self-concern and self-love, we do what leads to suicide, disappearance of trust, neglect of our talents, and neglect to assist others. The laws of physical nature and their impact on desire are morally arbitrary from the standpoint of laws of rational nature. Let's put the point bluntly, as Kant himself will shortly. From the standpoint of laws of physical nature and its impact on desire, liars lie, and thieves steal, and murderers murder. But none of that makes sense from the standpoint of laws of rational nature or of goodwill.